The day they read her name out loud, the wind off Lake Superior sounded like it was trying to erase the words. It was late October, too cold for tourists, too early for the real snow, and the little church in Copper Harbor was packed anyway. Coats steamed at the shoulders. Boots left wet crescent moons on the wooden floor. Outside, the lake rolled like hammered steel under a slate sky, and every so often a gust would slam into the stained glass windows, hard enough to make the whole building shiver. Ethan Cole sat in the back pew where he could see every exit without looking like he was trying. Old habits, the kind that don't end when the contract ends. The kind that live in your spine and your breath. Rex lay at his feet, chin on his paws, ears half raised. Not restless, not relaxed, just tuned. Up front, a framed photograph rested on a stand draped with a simple black cloth. A woman in a rescue helmet, cheek smudged with ash, smiling like she'd just been handed a second life and planned to spend it on other people. Hannah Pierce, search and rescue specialist, volunteer instructor, the person who could walk into a storm and come out carrying someone else's hope over her shoulder. The official story was clean and brutal. A flash flood in an old storm drain system beneath an abandoned resort outside Marquette. A cave-in, a surge, no way to reach the pocket of air where she'd been last seen. The county had called off the operation after 3 days. FEMA had filed their forms. The mayor had said the right words. The world had packed her into a sentence, pronounced dead. They said it like it was a kind of mercy. Ethan didn't feel merciful. He felt empty in the way a room feels after someone slams a door, like the air itself has been yanked out. He hadn't known Hannah long, not in the way people were supposed to know each other before grief claimed them. 6 months, 1 training weekend, a handful of calls afterward, but she'd had a way of speaking to him that didn't tiptoe around his silence or try to fix it with comfort. She just addressed it, like weather, like fact. "You still think like you're going to be shot," she'd told him once, smiling faintly as he automatically positioned himself with his back to a wall. "It's exhausting, Ethan." He'd shrugged. "It's kept me alive." "And what's it keeping you from?" He hadn't answered then. He didn't have one now either. The pastor spoke about service, about courage, about the unseen costs of being the one who runs toward danger. People nodded, people wiped their eyes. Someone in the front row held a little boy tight against their shoulder and whispered, "It's okay." Ethan watched Rex instead of the casket. Because Rex wasn't watching the pastor. Rex was watching the side door. Rex's nostrils flared once, then again. His body stiffened like a drawn wire. Ethan's fingers tightened on the edge of the pew. "What is it?" he murmured, barely moving his lips. Rex lifted his head. One ear snapped forward, the other angled back. A low sound grew in his chest, not a growl, not fear, recognition. Ethan followed Rex's gaze. A woman had slipped into the church and stood just inside the doorway, half hidden by the coat rack. She wore a rain jacket too large for her, hood down, hair plastered to her forehead. Her face was pale, eyes wide, hands trembling like she'd run the entire way. She didn't look at the photograph. She looked straight at Ethan, and for a second, Ethan couldn't place her. Then she swallowed and mouthed the name without making sound. "Hannah?" Ethan's heart kicked once, hard enough to hurt. The woman shook her head, fast, frantic, and pressed something to the inside of her palm, a motion small enough no one else would notice. A device, black, scuffed, the size of a thick credit card, a locator beacon. Ethan didn't breathe. Rex rose to his feet without being told. The pastor's voice faded into a muffled hum as Ethan stood and walked down the aisle, not running, not rushing, because running in a church draws eyes, and Ethan didn't want eyes. He reached the side door. The woman stepped back, guiding him into the narrow hallway, out of sight of the gathering. Up close, Ethan recognized her. Maya Larkin, Hannah's field tech, the one who managed equipment logs and comms during deployments. 20-something, sharp as a tack, usually fearless in the way young people can be before the world teaches them what fear costs. Right now, she looked like she'd aged 10 years. "You can't," Maya whispered, voice cracking. "You can't say her name out loud. You can't." Ethan held up a hand. "Talk." Maya's eyes flicked down to Rex, then back up. "I was cleaning out her locker at the county SAR building. They said it was time. They said her parents wanted everything boxed." Ethan's jaw clenched. And? Maya swallowed. And her gear, most of it was tagged and recorded. Helmet, harness, radio. But her backup beacon wasn't there. Ethan stared at the black device in Maya's palm. Maya's hands shook as she offered it to him. I checked the log. It was signed out to her. It never came back. Ethan didn't touch it yet. That doesn't mean anything. It does, Maya whispered, eyes bright with panic. Because it pinged. Ethan's blood went cold. Maya tapped the beacon screen. A faint green light blinked once, weak as a heartbeat. It woke up, she said. 2 nights ago, just for a second. Then again this morning. The system flagged it as a phantom signal because she's listed as deceased. The automated report got buried. Ethan's mind moved fast, too fast. Where? Maya hesitated. Ethan leaned in. Where, Maya? She blew out a shaky breath. Not the drain system, not where they said she died. Ethan's eyes narrowed. It's coming from the old Ironwood Resort property, Maya continued. But not from the collapsed tunnels, from farther north, beyond the fencing. There's a service access road that leads to an old water treatment building. It's been off limits for years. Ethan felt the church walls close in around him. Who says it's off limits? Maya's lips pressed together. A company called North Ridge Holdings. They bought the land. They've got private security. They claim it's contaminated. They claim it's unsafe. Ethan stared at the blinking green light until it smeared into a line. What are you telling me? He said, voice dangerously calm. Maya's throat bobbed. I'm telling you Hannah isn't in that drain. Rex let out a low whine, like he'd understood every word. Maya's eyes filled. I'm telling you she left something behind on purpose. Ethan finally took the beacon. It was warm from Maya's hand, heavy with implication. How long can it transmit? He asked. If it's in low power mode. Days, weeks, Maya said. But it's weak now, like it's being blocked, like it's underground. Ethan closed his fist around it. A funeral was happening 10 feet away. A story was being sealed shut. Ethan could feel the old part of him, the part that only knew missions and losses, rise up like a tide. Why come to me? He asked. Maya's laugh was brittle. Because the sheriff told me to stop. Because FEMA told me to stop. Because Hannah's parents told me to let her rest. Her voice broke. Because everyone keeps saying accept it, like acceptance is a virtue when it's just surrender. She looked at Rex, her expression softening with something like hope. And because Hannah talked about you, she whispered. She said if she ever went missing and the system decided it was easier to bury her than find her, you'd be the one person stubborn enough to call it a lie. Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just turned, walked out the side of the church with Rex at his heel, and stepped into the cold wind like a man walking into a different life. Opkent at 4. The drive west along the shoreline was a blur of gray water and bare trees. Ethan kept both hands on the wheel. Rex sat upright in the passenger seat, staring forward like he was tracking something in the distance only he could see. Maya sat in the back, clutching her laptop and a small plastic case of adapters like it was a life raft. Show me the signal, Ethan said. Maya flipped the laptop open. The screen glowed in the dim cabin light. A map loaded slowly. Then a set of coordinates appeared, pulsing with that same weak green dot. It's not GPS precise, Maya said, but it's consistent. Same area, same footprint. It's staying put. Ethan's voice was flat. If it's staying put, she's either unconscious or restrained. Maya flinched at the word. Restrained? Ethan didn't soften it. Softening things didn't make them safer. How do you know it's hers? He asked. Maya's fingers moved fast. The beacon has a device ID. It's assigned to her file. Same serial number. Same encryption key. She looked up. No one else can trigger it without that key. Ethan didn't say what he was thinking, unless someone took it off her and brought it there. He kept his eyes on the road. Any chance it's a glitch? Maya shook her head. It's broadcasting. It's real. Ethan's jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. He reached into the console and pulled out an old flip phone, one he used for things he didn't want tracked, and dialed a number he hadn't touched in months. When the line picked up, the voice on the other end was sleepy and irritated. If this is about your truck's extended warranty... Doc, Ethan said. Silence, then a sigh. Ethan Cole, you've got a way of calling only when the universe is on fire. I need you. A pause. Define need. I'm going into Ironwood Resort property, Ethan said. Private security, unknown threat, possible hostage. A longer pause, then quieter. Who? Hannah Pierce? Doc didn't speak for a moment. Doc's real name was Samuel Barrett, former combat medic. The kind of man who'd patched Ethan up in places they never spoke about afterward. Ethan didn't owe many people his life. Doc was one of them. She's dead, Doc said finally, but there was no conviction in it, just a tired attempt to match the world. Ethan's voice didn't waver. Her beacon is transmitting. Doc exhaled slowly. Where are you? 2 hours out. I'll send coordinates. Another pause. Then Doc said, I hate you. Ethan almost smiled. Yeah. And I'm on my way, Doc finished. Don't do anything stupid before I get there. Ethan ended the call. Maya stared at him from the back seat, eyes wide. You're really doing this, she whispered. Ethan's gaze stayed on the highway. I'm really not letting them bury her while she's breathing. Rex let out a soft huff, like agreement. And... By the time they reached the edge of Ironwood Resort, the sky had darkened into early evening and the wind had sharpened. The resort itself was a skeleton on a hill, collapsed roofs, broken windows, faded signage that once promised families laughter and warmth. Now it promised only rot. A chain-link fence wrapped the property line with fresh "No trespassing" signs and a new set of security cameras that didn't belong on an abandoned ruin. Ethan parked down the road behind a stand of pines and killed the engine. The silence after the drive was heavy. Maya leaned forward. The signal is strongest. Here. She zoomed in on the map. A cluster of old utility buildings sat near a ravine. That water treatment building. It's been locked for years, but... Ethan lifted a hand, stopping her. Rex had gone rigid again. Ethan followed his line of sight. Headlights appeared at the far bend of the access road, moving slowly. A black SUV. No county markings. No plates visible from this angle. It paused at the gate. A man got out. Big. Broad shoulders. He scanned the fence line with a flashlight like he was counting shadows. Ethan leaned closer to the windshield without moving his body too much. The man wasn't wearing a sheriff's uniform. He was wearing tactical gear, private security. The man spoke into a radio. Then the gate motor whined and the fence slid open. The SUV disappeared onto the property. Maya's voice shook. They patrol. Ethan's mouth went dry. Yeah. Rex didn't growl. He just watched, ears forward, body still, like he was memorizing. Ethan reached back and grabbed his pack from the rear seat. He checked the contents without looking. Habit. He hadn't been on an official operation in years, but the muscle memory didn't care what the paperwork said. He looked at Maya. You're staying in the truck. Maya's eyes flashed. No. Ethan's voice cut through her. You're a civilian. You're not trained for contact. If something goes wrong, I need one person to stay alive long enough to call for help. Maya swallowed hard. Help from who? The sheriff told me to stop. Ethan didn't answer. He just opened the door and stepped out into the cold. Rex jumped down beside him, quiet as falling ash. Ethan crouched, bringing his face level with Rex's. He rested a hand on the dog's thick neck. This is not a game, he murmured. If I say down, you go down. If I say back, you go back. You stay with me. Rex's eyes were steady, loyal, unblinking. Ethan stood, shouldered his pack, and moved toward the tree line. Every step felt like stepping away from the world's version of reality, and closer to his own. Doc arrived 40 minutes later, in a battered pickup that looked like it had survived 3 wars and a divorce. He stepped out wearing a flannel jacket over a tactical vest, his hair more gray than when Ethan last saw him, his face still carved with the same stubborn calm. He looked at the fence, the cameras, the fresh tire tracks. Then he looked at Ethan. This better not be a raccoon with a glow stick, Doc said. Ethan held up the beacon. The green light blinked, faint and undeniable. Doc's expression changed, not to hope, not to joy, but to something colder. Focus. All right, he said quietly. Show me what you've got. Ethan laid out the plan in short sentences. Entry point at the ravine. Avoid the gate, use the terrain. Get eyes on the water treatment building. Confirm. Extract. Doc listened, then said, "You're missing a piece." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What?" Doc nodded toward the resort's broken main lodge. "That's where they'll have a base. You go straight to the utility building, you might walk into their line of sight." Ethan stared at the lodge. The windows were dark, but dark didn't mean empty. Doc continued, "And Ethan, if she's alive, you need to prepare for the fact that this isn't an accident. People don't disappear into private land by coincidence." Ethan's jaw tightened. Doc glanced down at Rex, who stood perfectly still, watching the fence like it was prey. "And that dog," Doc added, "hasn't stopped scanning since I arrived." Ethan looked at Rex. Rex's nose twitched. Then he turned his head slowly toward the far end of the fence line and froze. Ethan followed his gaze. A gap in the trees revealed a narrow service culvert beneath the fence, an old drainage pipe half hidden by brush. It was too small for a person to walk upright through, but big enough to crawl. Rex took 2 steps toward it, then looked back at Ethan like he was asking permission. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Okay," Ethan murmured. "Good boy." He looked at Doc. Doc's mouth twitched. "He just found your door." They moved after full dark. No flashlights, no talking. Just breath and the soft crunch of dead leaves under boots. Ethan led, Rex close at his knee. Doc followed, carrying a small medical kit and a compact tool roll. They reached the culvert. The air near it smelled faintly of rust and damp concrete. Rex lowered his head and sniffed, then gave a small, urgent whine. Ethan leaned in. There was another scent, faint but sharp, cutting through the wet earth. Bleach. Someone had been cleaning something. Ethan's skin prickled. He slid a hand along the inside edge of the pipe. The concrete was damp, but there were scuff marks. Fresh. Someone else had used this route recently. Ethan looked at Doc. Doc's eyes were hard. "We're not the first ones sneaking in." Ethan didn't like that, but he crawled anyway. The pipe was cold and tight. The sound of their movement echoed like it was louder than it was. Rex moved through first with practiced ease, claws scraping softly. Ethan followed, shoulders brushing the concrete. Doc came last. On the other side, they emerged into a shallow ravine filled with tangled brush and the smell of wet stone. Above them, the resort's broken silhouette loomed against the clouds like a carcass. They moved low along the ravine until they reached a line of sight on the utility area. That's when Ethan saw the truth. The water treatment building looked old from a distance, peeling paint, cracked masonry. But the doors were new, steel, reinforced, and there were cameras mounted under the eaves, their lenses glinting faintly as they swept side to side. No county project had put those there. A faint hum came from inside. Generators. Ethan raised the beacon. The green light blinked faster now, stronger. Maya had been right. The signal was here. Doc's voice was a whisper. "You see the guard shack?" Ethan followed his gaze. A small prefab hut sat tucked near the building, its window glowing with the light of a monitor. A man sat inside, headset on, scrolling. Ethan watched his posture, his weapon, the way his head moved, trained but bored. Ethan's mind raced through options. Then Rex's entire body tensed. Ethan felt it through the leash. Rex stared at the far side of the building, toward a sloped service entrance that led underground, half hidden under a corrugated metal awning. Rex's ears pinned forward, his nostrils flared. He was smelling something. Someone. Ethan whispered, "Rex, what do you have?" Rex made a sound deep in his chest, not aggression. Recognition. And then he did something that made Ethan's blood turn to ice. Rex whined, soft, high, like a greeting, like the sound a dog makes when he finds someone he knows. Ethan's throat tightened. Doc stared at Rex. "Oh my God!" Ethan didn't move. He didn't want to breathe, because somewhere under that building, Hannah might have just heard her dog's voice. And if she heard it, then she was close enough to hear anything, including the wrong footsteps. Ethan waited for the camera sweep and moved. Fast, low, silent. Rex stayed glued to him, controlled, focused, but vibrating with restrained urgency. Doc stayed behind the ravine line, watching the guard shack, ready to cover with distraction if needed. Ethan crossed the open patch of gravel in 2 bursts, timing the camera swing with the wind. He reached the shadow under the awning. The air here was warmer, smelling of machinery and chemical cleaner. A keypad was mounted beside the metal door. Ethan didn't touch it. He pressed his ear to the door. At first, nothing. Then, a faint sound. Not a voice. A tapping. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats again. Ethan's heart slammed. It was too deliberate to be random. It was a code, a pattern. Ethan lowered his head and whispered, "Hannah?" The tapping stopped. A long, terrifying second passed. Then 2 slow knocks, like an answer. Doc's whisper crackled through Ethan's earpiece. "Ethan, movement, 2 patrols heading your way from the lodge side." Ethan's gaze snapped left. 2 silhouettes walked along the gravel path, flashlights swinging lazily. They were close. Too close. Ethan looked at Rex. Rex was staring at the door, trembling with controlled restraint. Ethan made a decision with the cold certainty of a man who knew there was no safe option left. He pulled a small tool from his pack, compact, quiet, designed for locks like this. He slid it into the seam and worked fast, fingers precise. The patrol's footsteps grew louder. Doc whispered, 30 seconds. Ethan got the latch loose. He pulled the door open just enough to slip inside. Rex went in first without being told. Ethan followed and pulled the door shut behind them. Inside, the air was dry and hot, humming with electricity. A stairwell led down, lit by harsh fluorescent strips. Ethan moved down fast, silent. At the bottom, a corridor stretched out. Clean concrete, security doors, the sterile smell of a place that wanted to pretend it wasn't doing anything wrong. Then Ethan saw her, not in a chair, not in some theatrical torture room. Worse. She was on a cot behind a glass partition like a specimen, her hair matted, her face bruised, an IV taped to her arm. A sensor pad stuck to her chest. A monitor beeped softly beside her, but her eyes were open. And when she saw Rex, her face cracked in a way Ethan had never seen before. Not weakness. Relief so deep it looked like pain. Rex let out a choked sound and pressed his nose to the glass, tail shaking. Hannah lifted a trembling hand and placed it against the barrier, fingers splayed, like she could feel him through it. Ethan's throat tightened. Then he saw the man at the far end of the room, a technician in a lab coat, head down over a laptop. He hadn't noticed them yet. Ethan lifted his weapon. Quiet, controlled. Not a soldier anymore, but still deadly when the moment required it. Doc's voice crackled urgently. They're at the door, Ethan. They're checking the keypad. Ethan's time snapped into shards. He moved. 1 step, 2. The technician looked up, eyes widening. Ethan closed the distance and slammed him into the wall, hand over his mouth, weapon pressed into his ribs. Make a sound, Ethan hissed, and you die. The technician's eyes flicked to Rex, then to Hannah behind glass. Then he did something Ethan didn't expect. He whispered, "You shouldn't have come." The words were calm, almost sad. Ethan's blood ran cold. "Open it." The technician swallowed. "The locks are—" Ethan shoved the weapon harder. "Open it." The technician's gaze shifted past Ethan to the stairwell. Ethan sensed it a fraction too late. A door hissed open behind him. A stun baton crackled. Ethan spun, too slow. The baton slammed into his shoulder, lightning pain ripping through him. His weapon slipped. Rex exploded. He didn't bark. He launched, a blur of muscle and loyalty and fury, crashing into the attacker, jaws locking onto the baton arm, wrenching it down with brutal precision. The attacker screamed. Ethan staggered, pain flaring, vision sparking. Doc's voice roared through the earpiece. "I'm coming in!" Footsteps pounded above. Ethan forced his body to move, grabbed his weapon, and fired once, controlled, dropping the second attacker before he could raise his gun. The corridor erupted with alarms. Red lights flashed. A siren began to wail. Hannah behind glass flinched at the sound, eyes snapping to Ethan, fear and urgency mixing. She mouthed something. Ethan leaned closer. Her lips formed 2 words. "Not safe." Then she lifted her hand and pointed, not at the door, but at the ceiling corner, a camera, and beneath it, a small, Speaker. Someone was listening. Someone had planned for this. Ethan's mind clicked. This wasn't a hidden accident site. It was a facility, a controlled place, a place built for keeping people alive just enough to be useful. Doc burst down the stairs, weapon up, face hard. He took one look at Hannah and swore under his breath like it was a prayer. "How?" he rasped. Hannah's voice came out raw but steady through the intercom system. "Ethan, listen, they'll kill us all if you don't move fast." Ethan slammed a hand against the glass. "I'm getting you out!" Hannah shook her head, eyes fierce. "Not through the stairs." Doc glanced at Ethan. "She's right. If they've got that kind of setup, the stairwell is a funnel." Rex returned to Ethan's side, chest heaving, ears up, blood on his muzzle, someone else's. Ethan looked at the technician still pinned to the wall, shaking. "Where's the emergency exit?" Ethan growled. The technician swallowed, eyes wide. "There's a service tunnel, old maintenance line, leads to the ravine." Ethan's pulse surged. "Open her!" The technician's hands trembled as he punched in codes on a panel. The lock on the glass partition clicked. The door slid open, and Hannah Pierce stepped out on unsteady legs, pale, bruised, but upright. Rex pressed into her, whining, tail shaking like he was trying to pour himself into her skin. Hannah dropped a hand into his fur and closed her eyes for half a second, like she was absorbing strength from him. Then she looked at Ethan, and the look she gave him wasn't gratitude. It was urgency. "Ethan," she said, voice cracking, "this isn't about me." Ethan's jaw clenched. "It is right now." Hannah grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "They're moving something, tonight, under the resort. Not chemicals, people. They're trafficking migrants through the old tunnels. But that's not the worst part." Doc's eyes hardened. "What's the worst part?" Hannah swallowed hard. "They're testing something on them, a sedative compound, a compliance drug. They call it Ridge Calm." Ethan's stomach turned. Hannah's gaze locked onto his. "I found out. That's why I'm here. Not because I got lost." Ethan's brain went cold and clear. Somewhere above them, boots thundered on the stairs. Voices shouted. Guns clicked. Time collapsed. Doc grabbed Hannah's arm. "Tunnel, now!" Ethan looked at Rex. Rex was already facing the corridor, ears forward, body ready. Ethan didn't know how deep this went yet. He only knew one thing with certainty. The world had buried Hannah because it was easier, and someone had counted on that burial to keep their secrets safe. Ethan Cole had never been good at letting the world choose what was easier. He tightened his grip on his weapon, nodded once to Doc, and moved with Rex and Hannah into the service tunnel as the facility filled with sirens, footsteps, and the sound of a lie collapsing behind them.